Leech number 1 and leech number 2 in place. Okay, here I am this morning filling out the old adage of physician heal thyself with a couple of sweet little helpers here, my sweet friends the leeches. And I thought I'd take this opportunity to share with you some of my passion for leeching and the old ways that seem to have been dropped off in our modern traditional medicine. So leeches were central to most traditions, right? Anyone that's spent time in a creek has, encountered leeches all over the world, traditional folk, and they certainly made their way into the big traditions of the world. And in Europe, at one point our doctors were called leeches, right? And I always thought it was a derogatory term, like you blood-sucking leeches, because we've got so many negative connotations with them. It's like snake, it's just like someone distrustful, but I quite like snakes. And the same with leeches. And so doctors weren't called leeches as an insult. They were called leeches because in so many European language bases, there's a term which is like leica or leicha or lechi, and it means shaman or sorcerer or something in this direction, according to the area of Lithuania up into the Norwegian kind of regions over throughout Eastern Europe, and also in the Celtic tradition as well. There's a base that goes there, and that so we didn't name our doctors after these little creatures. We named these little creatures after our shamans that utilize them. So they're kind of called shamans. That's what a leica is, a kind of a shaman, a healer. And that makes sense because in the old traditions, then moving bad blood was central, right? Now these days, of course, I'm utilizing the leeches today for a rotator cuff injury that I've got, and they have mostly people are utilizing them for all sorts of conditions like endometriosis or headaches, definitely joint pain and musculoskeletal injuries, utilized for cancers and biomedical kind of conditions, right? I'll give you some more of that later. But I feel you, that you are just wriggling delightfully there. But back in the day, there was, in traditional medicine and in tribal medicine and in shamanic medicine, then blood is central. And moving bad blood was central. And when we say blood, we don't just mean the fluid that the leeches are sucking on here, but it was continuous with the notion of soul in so many ways. Blood is the medium of soul, and so moving bad blood, if we had bad blood between my family and yours, or my tribe and yours, then that's an expression that still makes sense, an idiom that's still in English. But at an individual level as well, then bloodletting practices, bleeding practices, microbleeding or venesection or leeching or blood cupping, there's a whole range of these practices, were definitely done to provide physical relief to a range of symptoms, but at the same time it was seen to be a part of the healing process, right? Shedding bad blood. And so the shamans, the leica, the leecha, the sorcerers, the storytellers, the enchanters, and the word means all of these things, are the ones that first started working hand in hand with the leeches. And they're just so central to the practice of medicine all the way up until the 18th century, 18th, 19th century. There's still booms happening and a massive big kind of trade in leeches. And it's not just in Europe. I think you can see sort of getting larger by the moment there, hanging down. That's in my Terry's major or minor, depending on how accurate the application was there. all the way across to India as well. Leeches are utilised, and the god of medicine, Dhanvantari, has 4 hands, and in one of those hands he holds a leech. That's how important leeches are, you know, in the Ayurvedic tradition as well. Dhanvantari holds a leech, the god of medicine. So leech is essential to the practice of traditional medicine, and so essential that it's something that perhaps we learnt off animals, right? So it's been observed that cows, cattle, but other creatures will frequent creeks that have a lot of leeches in them, because although the process of the leech bites doesn't hurt, when they leave with less joint pain, and they leave feeling better, right? They feel relieved by the leechy waters, and so they're classed not as parasites but as symbionts, because they're in a symbiotic relationship with us, and they're providing us with as much benefit as they are getting. And so they do that by injecting this substance called hirudin, which is the most potent anticoagulant known to medicine. And we can't synthesize it well, which is why hospitals are utilizing leeches. If you lose an ear, God forbid, or a finger, and they have to stitch it back on, they want to make sure that it holds, then they'll use leeches after the microsurgery in the hospitals. And I get hospitals calling me up from time to time, asking for leeches if they've run out, because they have someone following a microsurgery. What I'm using them here for is a stubborn musculoskeletal problem. Now this big mark that you can see there, that's not from the leeches, that's a cupping mark. And so I did some cupping beforehand to move the stagnant blood and draw it to the surface and make sure that there's a good vascularization of that area, so the leech can smell and attach quite well in that area. So those scary looking marks are not leech marks, they're cupping marks, which is another part of traditional medicine, right? I'm using it for an injury that has been, I've been unable to resolve, partly because it's in my rotator cuff back there. Terry's, I think it's Terry's major, I think it's Terry's major. And so it's back over there. You can see some more of those cupping marks. And so we can see, whoa, and it hurts, when I, oh, look at that, it hurts when I rotate. And it's been around for some months. It's, you know, it's not crippling, but it's not pleasant, and it stops me weight bearing. And so when other therapies fail, when bodywork fails, when acupuncture fails, when physiotherapy and chiropractic fail, because they're a better first point of call, then the therapy that I find most effective for musculoskeletal problems is leech therapy, where there's an injection of an anticoagulant delivered lovingly by a leech directly into those areas. And today I've only got 2 on, but sometimes some things will require 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, you know, a larger amount depending on what's going on. And it's quite remarkable, I have to say, it's quite remarkable how effective it is. It takes a few days for the blood supply to increase and for all of those beneficial actions to come through. But I've had a lot of clients, you know, frozen shoulder for 7 years, one woman, and a single treatment, and suddenly she was moving again. Other people with joint pain and things like this that I've been unable to help. Usually it goes hand in hand with internal medicines at the same time. We set them up and make those changes and then do this on the other side of it. You can see them getting bigger. Have you noticed them getting bigger since we've started? There they are, getting bigger inside there. But it's also utilised, I leech my father across his chest and back region to reduce his chances of adverse cardiovascular events because of the blood thinning. And so it's definitely used for in cardiovascular conditions. It's used anywhere you need to move blood to an area, so it can be used for headaches. My grandmother had leeching as a little girl in the late 20s in Australia for migraines, right? So we're still present there. But it's also used for other conditions. It's used for cancer as well, because cancer has an unusual way in which it has reduced and then increased blood supply to it. And angiogenesis, oncogenesis is powered by the cancer producing increased blood supply to it, but at the start it happens, there's often it's hypothesized by some, and it connects to traditional medicine ideas, that sometimes blood stagnation and poor blood supply and the removal of metabolic wastes in those tissues is also connected to it. So it's used for cancer as well. Other areas that leeching is utilized for is like endometriosis and some menstrual problems as well. So we've covered cardiovascular, we've covered musculoskeletal, we've covered some of those hormonal menstrual disharmonies, pain, and consciousness as well, by leeching around the base of the skull. Then the circulation to the brain is increased, and also cosmetic. You may have seen me posting photos on the vampire facials that I've done for my wife, where the points behind the ears were used by noble ladies because the blood supply goes across the face, and they would do that, and it produces a flushing and improved collagen synthesis. So essentially, leeches are used for a wide variety of problems, and they're a precious part, oh, there we go, of our tradition. And here we go, my little sweetheart has just dropped off. You saw it here. And so now I'm going to put this little darling into some water, and she will stay there happily for months digesting that meal. And I'll change her water sometimes, right? And then later on down the track, when she's hungry, then I'm sure I'll have some spot where she can have another feed. All right, there you have it. There's a live overview of the tradition of leeching. I'm going to take this little darling now and tuck her away nice into a quiet, moist little jar of water. Take care.